And Marilyn, in addition to what you already mentioned, she's been part of the ICF Global Board for, I think, over 6 years, recognized for her visionary and innovative leadership with the Thomas Leonard Achievement Award in the ICF Regional Conference in June of 2015. And I've written, there's more in there in the text box if people would like to read more. But without any more further ado, Marilyn, we'd love for you just to take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions, Michael and Cynthia, and the opportunity to be with you. And so Ryan and Rina are here as well. And has anyone else joined, Michael? Because I'm not looking at that chat box.
That's it for now. It's currently five of us.
Okay,
Yeah.
Great. Well, as you can see, I'm going to be sharing a Prezi with you today. And I like the Prezi because it shows the entire journey to start with. And I like to think about that as a metaphor for approaching cultural biases, our life, our business, that we're continually on this journey of learning and development. And it doesn't stop. It shows that it stops here on the screen, but it really doesn't stop. And so I am always continuing to learn and grow and develop. I have not arrived at a final destination. So thank you for joining me on this learning journey today. So this is my first image. So sometimes our cultural biases can cloud our judgment and sabotage our success and create some misunderstandings. And we all have biases. So we're going to take a look at ours today. And I think when you sent this out, Michael, did you share that free Harvard assessment for people? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So people are very frequently surprised, especially those of us who, like you all, are used to working multiculturally, that we still have biases. Our goals today are to identify bias and how it may sabotage success, learn a quick way to uncover and update bias to build trust, and develop a strategy to manage bias to expand your impact and better serve your clients. And Michael asked if this Prezi was available. The Prezi is hard to share. In print form, it turns out to be about 15 pages. So I'm recommending that you just go to my blog instead. There's an impact series there of, I think, 6 blogs with 2 steps for each blog. And so this photo image here is that I can offer you a taste today. You know, there are entire programs and universities on this topic, and I am continually updating. I get new articles every day on this topic. So I'm offering you a taste today, not a complete dish. And so I promised that we were going to look at what we can learn from Google about bias. And this is a little 4-minute video to get us started that they use in their training. And the background of this is that, like many US-based IT organizations, they are predominantly male and, you know, predominantly white male. And they realized they were missing out because the research shows the greater the diversity is, especially at the top level and at the board, the greater profitability for an organization. So here's the 4-minute video from Google.
What would the world look like if everybody were aware of the stereotypes that they have and the biases that they have? When we talk about unconscious bias, we're basically saying our worldview can actually exert an influence beyond our conscious awareness, and it creates ambiguity.
You go to an engineer who's built something extremely innovative, and you say, who do you think your user is? This is where I have the most fun. My My name is TV Raman, and I led our work on Android accessibility for 3 years. Write down everything that you think you know about your user with respect to abilities, inabilities, special abilities, disabilities. Almost every assumption that you write down on that whiteboard about this is the user I think I'm building for is questionable. Because our various unconscious biases define the boundaries you're unwilling to expand.
These biases, they're the shortcuts that our brain has created so that we can deal with the information that we process every single day.
Right when we see anyone, whether we think about it or not, we are implicitly, automatically making judgments about how warm and competent that person or thing is.
All humans need to make decisions, and so we fill in the blanks because our brains are wired to do that, and we fill in with things we don't know with, past experience. Oh, you pattern map to someone I think I should hire, so I'm going to hire you versus this person because they didn't map, because I can't fill in the blank because they don't look like me or they're not from my same background, and so I can't see how they're going to make the jump.
Every single person is great at things that you may not expect them to be, but it's really hard for us to see that when we're so powerfully guided by the things we expect to be true in the world.
I grew up surrounded with this conversation about what you can't do and what you won't be able to do. My name's Enrico, and I'm an autistic software engineer. The first time I go through the performance review process, I was asked for 5 strengths. It was the first time that I had ever been prompted to think in that way about myself, and it was really a life-changing moment for me.
When we are working in our day-to-day jobs, we are still making judgments about the people around us, about the resumes we see, about the employees that we're trying to decide, whether to put them on teams or not.
People are very wedded to the idea that they can perceive something objectively, and statistically they're wrong. But it's hard. You become attached to this idea that you can assess something by looking at it.
These subtle assumptions we make about people can have lasting effects on who we're promoting, who we're hiring, who we're putting in leadership positions. We have the responsibility to understand the assumptions that we make and understand the errors that we make. But it's not just for the collective good. If you take the time to understand more about this, there are things that you can implement for yourself that'll help you develop as a leader and to do your job even better.
It made me realize how often I have a very strong belief that is simply incorrect. When I look at one of these evaluation situations, the first question is, how can I eliminate the sources of potential bias and leave just the data so we can actually make better decisions?
If you're not conscious of the biases that you have, you're just not contributing at the level that you could, and you're not innovating at the level you could. And so your products won't be as good. Your results won't be as good.
When you think outside the box with respect to the assumptions you made about how somebody would use this wonderful thing you built, and when you sort of broaden that perspective as to who you change the world for, you build something even bigger.
Okay. So let's do a debrief and hear what is your takeaway from that 4-minute video.
This is Michael. It was really insightful. I like the fact, what I got from that was that the way we're wired, we're going to be biased. It's the way the brain works. So it's not
Yes.
a bad thing, it's natural.
Absolutely, thank you. Because part of the description for this program was that as coaches, we may aspire to be judgment-free, but that's not really possible.
Mm.
And I think, this is Cynthia.
Yes.
What I got out of it is that we need to at least bring our unconscious biases into our conscious level,
Yes.
and so that we can at least address them.
Yes. And we're going to do an exercise around that this morning. Thank you. Anyone else?
It is Rainer. We have been actually, when I was working in Bacardi, was actually looking into that area, and this one was more about purely one, probably would say one-dimensional male-female. And it was incredible how hard it is to overcome. And we spent a lot of money on getting it up to the consciousness level, and I think we weren't successful. I think it continues to be a big theme, but this one was only, looking at the male-female dimension, your woman in leadership, and if you look at diversity, it's much wider, and so I think it's a huge topic, and it's hard to overcome.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And Google actually has put besides doing training with all their employees, they've put 4 policies into place. And I referred to that in an earlier blog on unconscious bias. And one of them was they realized all of their training rooms were named after men. And they changed that. And then they also had created this policy that when you see it in action, when you recognize the unconscious bias in action in yourself or someone else, they gave permission for people to call that out. So that's kind of interesting. But as a result, they are attracting, of their 4 initiatives, they are attracting more women to the organization. So it's working, maybe a couple of %, but it's improved some. Thank you for your comments.
Marilyn, this is Brian. Can I chip in here briefly?
Please.
I was curious, if you know, and you may not, with the permission to call someone out unconscious bias, I sort of wondered what that was like in practice and how that sort of played out, if you knew.
I think it can be very tricky, Brian, as you can imagine. How it's done so that it doesn't then become a punishing type of thing, but it's okay, we recognize this is happening, what can we do about it, rather than embarrassing or shaming or punishing. I think it can be very tricky. A great point.
Thank you.
So these are some of what I think are key points about unconscious bias. Is it good or bad? What do you think? Well, actually, it's a natural thing. So you heard in the video that we all have bias, and we actually operate in the unconscious. How much do you think, what % of our time do you think we spend in our unconscious? Any guesses?
I think most of the time, like 80%, if not more.
Yes, it's over 99%. According to the latest research, over 99%. And part of that, as you can see, is our brains are flooded with information. So we're receiving 11 million bits of information per moment, and our brains can process 40. So they automatically, our brains set up these thousands of automatic filtering systems. It was referred to as a shortcut in that video. And we have to have that to survive. So if you can imagine crossing a street or getting on a subway or driving a car, if you had to go through step by step in your mind each thing that you're doing, you wouldn't make it. So part of it's good, necessary for survival, and it can get in our way. And this judgment shuts down the brain in 0.07 seconds. That's something that I heard on a recent from Judith E. Glasser, one of her programs on the World Business Executive Coaching Summit. And she's given me the reference for that. So, you know, in this blog series, the impact model then is to identify your bias, look at how to manage it, plan to access untapped potential, increase our awareness of our culture and our cultural bias, and get some accountability around it, and then take stock of how we're doing and continue what's successful. And the Ache model is based on Janet Bennett's work, and that's how I look at things culturally. So again, the A is for awareness, the C is for curiosity, that humility, including that deep cultural humility of my perspective is not the only perspective, not necessarily the, quote, right perspective, and with empathy. So any comments there?
This is Rainer. Marilyn, you were talking about cultural bias. Isn't, I mean, to me, bias is potentially wider, right? I mean, with my German background, I might have a certain perspective or bias, but isn't there within the culture also like individual bias? I mean, don't we differ, you know, human being by human being with our lens, or can you actually put it together into like there's a cultural German bias? So
yes,
can you elaborate on this one a bit?
Yeah, that's a great comment. And yes, both. So yes, we might tend to have from our culture, the region that we grew up in, our nationality, our family, certain biases. For example, when I was growing up in the U.S., one of the biases at the time was very anti-Russia. And my father took the four of us children to a medical conference here with visiting doctors from Russia, and we had this cultural fear of Russians. They were going to bomb us or convert us to communism or kill us. And I met one of the doctors, and he was so nice. And it was like, you know, my little 9-year-old brain, it was like, well, maybe this isn't right, you know, that they're all bad and scary. And then last year when I was in Bali, working with a coach training program for 2 weeks, almost all of the participants, 23, were from Russia. And so if I had not updated that bias, you can just imagine the effect that would have had on me and my work and our establishing a relationship. So that's one example.
Marilyn?
Yes.
I have a comment. I'm not sure how whether it's relevant. But yeah, just responding to the amount of information and biases. When in terms of practice of coaching, I personally prefer phone coaching because for myself it cuts down a lot of unnecessary distraction and perhaps unconscious biases. But as well, you know, we are learning to manage our biases. But on the coachee side, for sure, they also have biases. And in Asia, a lot of them would prefer, they may have in their mind an image of an ideal coach. And
Yes.
a lot of times they may look at, female, maybe, not as mature as they, expect. The phone coaching would actually help to, avoid some of those biases.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally feel there's an advantage to phone coaching.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Cynthia. And yes, it's interesting how much we want to share with our clients about our culture and how much we ask our clients about culture. And that's something I'm now including in writing on my initial paperwork with a client, is what you want me to know about your culture, including values and beliefs, and what you want to know about mine, because how trust is developed differs some culturally. And with some cultures, they want to know more about you as part of that establishing the trust. And it can be important for us to know, just as you've shared, the attitude possibly towards women and how that might affect, say, one of the leaders that I'm working with. Any other questions before we move on? Thank you for comments. Okay, so again, the impact, identifying bias, managing bias, planning how to access untapped potential, that's where we're going next. Acting on strategy with awareness and accountability, communicating more effectively based on the greater awareness of the cultural bias, and taking stock of your success and repeating. So how might these factors be limiting your coaching? So Cynthia's just talked about what we call, the glass ceiling. Women having a hard time, reaching the boardroom, or being viewed as the desired coach. The bamboo ceiling, I shared that article when I Googled unconscious bias Asia Pacific. That's what popped up, is in Australia, this idea that people of Asian descent are also not seen normally in top leadership positions. And I spoke with an Australian colleague yesterday, and she said it's almost any kind of ceiling in Australia other than white male, and that the issue with females is still very much an issue there, not the glass ceiling. Generation gaps. When I was at the Asia Pacific conference and attended the program on Korean culture, that was one of the things they talked about, is the big difference between the generations, and how that's showing up in the coaching. Lingering cultural resentments and fears. So that's another thing that I've heard from colleagues in Korea is, the country has been invaded, I think, 400 times. It sits between China and Japan, two very powerful countries, and there's some lingering fear or caution. And, I want to be sensitive about this issue. This is a sensitive issue, and if I'm stepping all over a line, maybe you can message Michael or let me know. And when I was in Japan visiting, I said I was going to Korea next. This was a friend, and visiting my daughter in Busan. She said, "Oh, Busan is so lovely. I've always wanted to go there." I said, "Well, you could come and visit." And she said, "Oh no, they don't like the Japanese right now." So, how does this affect your coaching? These lingering biases that show up in many different ways. How are you noticing it? Or as you stop and think about it now, how is it limiting, how might it be limiting your coaching or affecting your coaching?
Marilyn, this is Rainer.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I was wondering, I was thinking when you talked about the examples, and I agree, with all of them. There is, it's to me it sounds more like it's limiting the coachee. And you have your cycle of influence. And we have many examples of the first woman on the board in companies. We have examples for like Asians, especially Indians, in big CEO positions, etc. So I believe, it influences my coaching practice in terms of we need to be aware, but it most likely influences the coachee itself, how they limit themselves.
Yes.
Or not.
Yes, thank you. I think both. So you could probably give some examples. Example for me this past week, it's a new client. I believe it was our second session. She's number 2 in the organization. She's in a higher position than her husband. She grew up, she's at midlife in an era where women were more at home, especially she grew up in a more rural setting with her own family, her mother at home, and so women were more in the background, and she is has to be speaking up more, and the person at the top is pushing her to do that, and she's experiencing some trouble with that. So I am working with her around that. That's one of our primary coaching goals. So that's how it shows up with her. I think as I've looked at this is as I network, as I'm marketing, how might I unconsciously be limiting my reach as a coach? Am I excluding anyone because I don't have pictures on my website of people that look like, potential clients that I could be working with? So is there some diversity on the images on my website? And when I go to networking and where I go to networking, am I limiting myself to talking only with women, only with men, only with people of a certain age or a certain ethnicity? So I think that's where we can, just as in that video, the man was talking about taking a look at our user and who do we think our user is? Who are our clients? And to write down or to think about everything about them. And who might we be missing that would be, great to work with? But we might be excluding them without knowing we're doing that. Does that make sense?
This is Rainer again. I was really wondering. It's like, we are all the time biased, and it almost sounds like I would need, how do you call it in Europe? It's supervision. So I would need a supervision coach for me to reflect all my biases, right? I mean, it's almost like you can't avoid it. And I mean, the example you just mentioned, like your website can already exclude certain groups. The way, to what kind of networking events, but even if you choose people in the networking event, that's biased. So, it's almost like, how can I start?
Can't win?
Yeah, it's almost like, how can I start? What is it to help me to, to at least reduce my bias? So, I mean, what can I do?
Yes. Well, some of the exercises that we're doing today, just like this, to think about it, then to go look at our marketing materials and at our networking event to be more aware of, where am I choosing to go? So right now you're on a call with Asia Pacific coaches, and where else are you networking? And when you go to a live networking event, how are you choosing, who to speak with? I will purposefully sometimes go to a group that's talking that's all male or all, younger than me, just to have a different type of conversation. Or start a table on my own and see who shows up. I listen to different news sources like the BBC, so I'm not getting just U.S. perspective. There's a, again, in the blog series, there's 2 steps for each of those blogs of different things that you can do. So this is a beginning, and there's more information there. And then, of course, books. Like there's Joseph Schall's book published this year on cultural dexterity. And there's a book by Howard Ross on unconscious bias. But I think a lot of it is, like you say, maybe even having an accountability partner, either a supervisor or a colleague, to check in with. And I integrate it as part of my mentor coaching program, so that the participants are honing their coaching competencies as it integrates with cultural competencies. And Sabrina's been part of that group. So, okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great ideas. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so these are some of the different cultural identities: religion, gender, race, ethnicity, marital status, political view, weight. That was a bias in my family growing up. My parents were both physicians, and my dad has this bias towards people who are clinically obese, so overweight that it affects their health. So that was something I grew up with in my home. Height. In the U.S., the men in top positions, including our presidents, are 6 feet tall or taller. The high percentage. Socioeconomic level, urban versus rural, educational level, whether someone is a native speaker or a non-native speaker, how someone is dressed, their attire, and their age. So I'm inviting you now to do this little check-in, to imagine one of your clients and to check in with yourself on what do I think I know about my client. as you think about all of these different cultural identities, it could be,
Hi,
yes,
Marilyn.
yes.
This is Catherine. I just want to maybe share an experience
Oh, thank
about the bias.
you.
I coach someone on a pro bono basis, so I never met that person, but I met him in person, and he has a very different kind of like attitude towards work, and also not really successful at work also. So he came to look for a coaching experience, and I did not know that I had bias over him at the beginning. And then I did coaching, and during the coaching, actually, there were some kind of negative emotions that I sensed about myself, and I realized that I was not really coaching. And then that gave me some awareness, and to be able to address that issue, I guess sometimes it could be negative, like emotions, that as an indicator to address that bias. But how do you see that, what if it's a positive like experience with the clients? Does that call bias also?
Oh, what a great question. Thank you. Well, we might have a preference for certain cultural identities. So just, to take one of these, like gender, and to say men are blank and fill in the blank for yourself, or women are blank and fill in the blank, and see if it is something positive or negative or both. Just like you realized, Catherine, that you were having some negative feelings and responses to your client. And so that's the point of this exercise. What do I know about them? How could my assumption or bias get in the way of our coaching? And what assumptions or bias do I need to update then? So you had some negative feelings, something about their attitude around work, it sounds like. Was that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then once you realized that, would you be able to share what you did about that?
I kind of like told myself, number one, it was not coaching, so the person in front of you need a coaching service rather than, anything else. So I kind of talked to myself, and then afterwards I also received a coaching from a coach, and then to help me to identify what is actually needed to kind of get rid of that bias. And the result of the coaching for me is that actually it's the kindness inside of us that can help us to kind of move away from the bias that we have. So I was very lucky to be able to coach him again in the next week, and it was not 100% that I can do it, but at least I was more aware on coaching him, and I still realize my negative emotion, but yeah.
Thank you for that. So it was becoming aware of it, and then remembering that you're there to serve the client through coaching. And so what can I do about this negative feeling or negative belief about this person so that I can still be there to serve them as their coach? And you worked with your own coach around that. So that's beautiful. Thank you. And yes, I think, Raina, you were talking about earlier in an organization that you'd work with the attitudes towards women, because they've been there for so long, and deeply seated beliefs can take a while to change. So it may not happen from one week or to the next, but it's something that if it's our intention to update our beliefs and our biases, then we can make progress, especially if someone else is helping to hold us accountable. And we're, we have that intention to serve and to provide the best coaching possible. Thank you so much, Catherine, for your example.
Can I add another thought here?
Yes, please.
Okay. Because, if you, and I just have also an example for myself, where I was, I think I was extremely biased towards somebody who was always negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't overcome it. And I basically said, I can't continue the coaching with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just potentially another consequence. And I'm not sure, what kind of recommendation do you give? And have you experienced it yourself where you thought your own bias is actually in the way and if you can't overcome it, then it's probably better to stop the coaching assignment?
That's a great question, and I'm not thinking of a coaching situation where I did that. I think that makes sense, Raina, for you to say, I don't think I can be the best coach for you. Let me help you find someone else, or here's a place to go to find another coach, because I want the best coaching for you. I noticed in several phone calls with friends last night that I called to check in or to plan something with them, and basically 2 people for a half an hour just complained. And I thought, maybe I need to update my friends. Either say something or realize this is just a time in their life where it's more challenging, or get some friends who are more positive.
Carolyn, I'm sorry.
I think Michael just dropped out.
Okay. So is Carolyn?
Oh, no. Sorry. Yeah. Please continue, Marilyn.
Okay. Was maybe he going to? Did Carolyn have a question? Are you there, Carolyn? No. Okay. All right. Well, any other questions or comments on this exercise? This is really taking a pause. I did a program Monday on centering pause, taking a centering pause, and then this unconscious bias pause, so that we know that centering or meditation or prayer, some mindfulness practice that includes some deep breathing, actually resets our bodies and our brains so that we our focus is improved. And so taking that pause first, and then this pause before we start coaching with someone, and check in with ourselves. Who do we think this client is? Based on what we know about them, and then our assumptions or our bias. And is there anything that needs to be updated so that it doesn't get in the way of our coaching? Or maybe, as Raina has said, we decide that this type of person, we're not good at coaching. It's not a good client for us. It's not a good match. So I would encourage you to take this into account in your coaching. And this is a practice that you could put in place before each coaching session or before each coaching contract. What do I think I know about this person? What might get in the way? What do I need to update? And again, it works better if you start with mindfulness practice or some deep breathing. So that's those are the questions, and then the coaching competencies that are addressed in this. How does our trust, again, I talked about how our cultural biases can affect trust, right? The trust and intimacy that we have. So you can imagine if the client senses that we have some type of judgment towards them, and our presence, how we show up as coaches, who we are, checking in with our biases and having the intention to clear some of those biases or update them so that we can be fully present with our client. And the other place I find it really shows up in coaching is establishing the coaching agreement and partnership. So, I'm a midlife coach, and if I have someone in their 20s that I'm coaching, how do they perceive me? Do they perceive me as like the wise person or someone like their mom who's there to give them advice and tell them what to do? Or do they perceive me as a partner in their development? That's important to look at. So questions or comments about how you see this relating to coaching and coaching competencies?
Marilyn, this is Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Sorry about that. Yeah, but I had, I'm not sure what you heard, but I definitely see how, as a Westerner coming to Japan, I often had a bias towards the power of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And realizing the limitations of that bias and how that bias sort of limits what my effectiveness as a coach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had some learning around that too. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Just even my tendency when someone is sharing their successes as a client is to say, "Oh, congratulations, on your progress." And one of my clients from Japan said, "Oh, really? That's kind of embarrassing when you say that to me, because what works better is for you to just tie in my individual success with how it's affecting the team and the organization."
Wow. It's great feedback from your client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was. I was very thankful they were able to provide that. Any other questions or comments here? This iceberg is, the very tip is our conscious level and what we can see culturally. And then what goes way down below the surface are those beliefs and values, cultural beliefs and values. Okay, so this is the journey that we've been on today, and I realize, we still have about 10 minutes left, and I want to have time for discussion, and also just to mention this Confident Credentialing with Cultural Competency Mentor Group coaching program that Sabrina has participated in, and I have another one coming up, and the information is on my website, but it is the only one I know of that integrates the two competencies, cultural and coaching, to maximize your impact. And it meets the requirement for ICF for mentor coaching, or you can get continuing coaching education units. So thanks for allowing me to share that. And I want to say thank you and ask how will you increase your impact as you consider your bias, and to invite you to consider me, my blog, and programs as resources for you. So other questions, comments, or do you have some announcements, Michael?
Rainier has an announcement okay. to make. But
before.
Hold off on that, yeah. Did you want to start to do that?
Before I talk about the announcement, just to share a example which I had today. I was thinking about, that's definitely bias. I was introduced to a lady. She's working in a German big company, and she has to go through an assessment center, and it's preparation for this assessment center. And I was wondering, she had a tattoo on her arm, which was very visible. And I was looking at it, and I thought, that looks provocative. In the German business context.
Yes.
I don't care about tattoos, or maybe I do, but maybe I in general I don't care at all. But that just jumped into my eye today in kind of, what kind of impact will it have for her in her working environment?
Yes.
And I'm currently struggling with, do I tell her or not? And it's certainly bias, but I'm not sure if this one is like being supportive bias, or is it, just a question to the room. I mean, it's just a funny situation because we talk about it today, and it's, what should I do?
Shirley, I think that's a really interesting question, because when we talk about culture, we often think about different, cultures from different ethnic and countries. But I think the tattooed community is a totally different culture, and I find myself cringing at times when I look at the tattooed people around me, whether up their neck and over their head and around their face, and maybe they do need to be told that it has an impact on them, and likely to have an impact on their employment opportunities and how people respond.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Raina, if they're working on their executive presence or wanting to move up, the corporate ladder. And in that case, I probably would say, one of the things that is important is, whether we like it or not, is our appearance. And would you like some feedback?
And also maybe sharing your own cultural bias, right?
Yes.
Actually, I'm not, I just was, I'm asking myself, I really don't care about tattoos. So, I would, if somebody sitting next to me as a colleague and has a tattoo, I don't care. I'm not sure, but I was actually wondering, do I care now? Because I talk about it, and it's actually one of the first things which came into my mind about her, and she wants to go through that assessment center. So basically, she wants to make a career in that company. So I mean, there is this executive presence type of thing, and to me, this one is a German company. It's a conservative company. So, and they walk around with ties. So I think there is a bit of judgment in that sense. That's the context. If it would be an internet company, a startup, I think nobody cares. And I would never give that feedback. But here, I sense it's in the cultural context. It's a challenge.
Yes.
For her.
So you've
It's a good.
heard from a few of us. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Cool.
And I just want to say I appreciate each of you speaking up and sharing your own examples and making comments and asking questions. So it's really a delight to be with you today.
Thank you, Marilyn. Does anyone else have any questions or comments before we sign off? And yeah, before we go, Renee would like to make an announcement, but before we give that announcement, that's for next month's talk. Just want to say thank you, Marilyn. This was great, very helpful. I love the presentation on the web, as well as your presentation and your way of being.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really insightful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your generosity, your time, and getting up at 6 in the morning to be with us.
I know that many times when you all are invited from Asia Pacific to meetings, it's at even less reasonable times for you. So I'm happy to do this.
That's another example of cultural biases, right? The time that.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we will be sharing this presentation with all the members.
Great.
So, thank you. And Renee, would you like to make the announcement about next month's talk, the research that you'll be sharing?
Yeah. Marilyn, also from my end, thank you very much. It was very insightful, very helpful. What I just wanted to share, and it sounds more, I never thought it's really an announcement. It's more sharing of next month's talk will be about the third coaching study, which we have done here in China. It's basically a long journey. It's a 5-year journey when we actually start with the first survey. And this one is being the biggest independent survey here in China. We had 369 participants, and we have reached basically almost 200 coaches and about 70 company representatives with very good insights. And what I would like to do in the next monthly talk to share highlights of the findings. It's a 88 pages study, and I will also then share the link so so you would be able to download it and have a look. So it's a great I think it's a great insightful product, and we're happy to share. APEC has sponsored, and APEC actually has sponsored all three surveys. So the continued sponsor support very much appreciated. So and in giving back, I would like to share it among the community, whoever is interested to join.
Thank you. That'll be August 19th, and there'll be an announcement about that next week or so. Thank you. And thank you again, Marilyn, for your time and your generosity.
It was my pleasure.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Michael, did you record?
Yes, I did. I'm trying to figure out how to turn off the recording.
Okay, great.
That was strange. Earlier, I never had that happen. I was speaking, and all of a sudden, I couldn't hear anything.
Oh.
Did you hear much of what I said the first time?
No, nothing.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think I must have clicked on something.
Yeah.
It's never happened before.
Yeah.
But that was great. That was a great call.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have any plans to be in Japan in the next year or so?
I don't have any plans to come to Japan the next year, so I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it'd be nice to meet at some point.
Yes.
And thank you.
Or
Go ahead.
If you're in the U.S. again.
Yeah, I'll be in Maine in a couple weeks, but probably won't be in Kansas.
Yeah.
And Cynthia's still on the call. Cynthia, thank you for the introduction. Cynthia?
She might have dropped off.
Or maybe she dropped off. So yeah, thanks again. We'll definitely let's keep in touch, and
let's do.
Well, I'm sure at some point our paths will cross and we can meet in person again.
That'd be great, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.